Welcome back to ICRS 2014 in Atlanta here. I'm with Mr. Robert Liardon again.
Good to see you.
Am I having your name up?
Show. Yes, you got it right. You got it right.
We're talking about God's Generals, the Missionaries. Now, this is the fifth?
This is the fifth volume, the brand new volume that's just coming out. And so it's the fifth volume. There'll be 12 volumes when I'm done with the series. So I'm kind of writing them over my life so I can enjoy them and not rush them.
Oh, yeah.
But this is an exciting volume. I actually, when I wrote this, I cried through some of the stories.
Really?
You know, some stories like, oh, but these I'm like, oh, I found myself crying like, don't die, don't do this. Because these missionaries, this book's about the guys who went first, like in the 1700s, 1800s.
The pioneers.
The pioneers like William Carey, David Brainerd, Judson Taylor, all these people that went places first. And they didn't go with, you know, an airplane ticket. They went on a boat with their wives. Like when William Carey came off the boat from England to India, they'd never seen white people dressed like, you know, British people were all proper back then. And they walked with the ladies with the big dresses, so people would stop and the kids would touch them because they were like pale. They were like ghosts. And so you read the story, and then, like in his life, you know, his wife would die. He died. So some of these people went places that the suffering was so sad. Like some of them had like up to a couple wives because one would die or the kids would die because of disease. And you know, I write about that more as thank God through the suffering they didn't quit. I wonder if we today, if we had to suffer like that, would we still stay on the field?
Oh my goodness!
I don't know about our present day stamina.
I don't know.
I hope I would, but you know, he would bury his wife and then he would bury a child or something with two children. Because you know, when babies are little, they're more acceptable to disease, and you're in foreign countries. And so it's a great volume to tell the story. They translated the Bible. A lot of these guys went there. These missionaries went. They knew they wanted to go. And so what they did was they would learn a medical skill or a language skill, so when they got there, they could also help people in the natural.
They can do something. Okay.
Some of these guys
That's good.
created language alphabets for the native people to have a written language they use today. You know, and so I'm thinking,
what kind of what language would be used?
Well, for example, the Burmese language, Myanmar. The missionary goes there. It took him 20 years to learn and to write the Bible in Burmese. And when you see the Burmese language, it's twists and dots and things, I thought, how in the world? But, you know, that was a part of their job. They felt like if we could get the word in the language of the people, it would change the nation. And it did.
Wow.
So they gave that their 20 years of life to learn a language and to translate the Bible so that they could give it to them. Now, the greatest story for me personally in this book, or my favorite, is the Hawaiian revival. The islands of Hawaii were used to be called the Sandwich Islands. And so in the 1800s, it was a place where all the military guys from America and from England would stop, and they would, you know, get water and food and sleep with all the native girls. And the story,
port visit.
Port visit. And the king and the queen of the native people would actually send how do I say this? They would send the virgins out for the sailors. That's what they did.
Their sacrifice.
And so they would give themselves to these guys. And so all of a sudden, the missionaries show up. And they start preaching the gospel and creating the language and doing this, and they get saved. The queen of the Hawaiian people stand up one day and makes a public confession that she gives her life to Jesus and will follow Christ.
Wow.
When that happens, the native people go, wow, and they start getting saved too. And at one time, the Hawaiian revival had the world's largest Protestant church of over 10,000 members in the church. This was in this early 1800s. So you have Bingham that goes there first. Then you have another story, a lady in the book that goes to Hawaii, is the first African-American single missionary ever sent out of America. She was a slave at one time.
Really?
And she receives Christ as a slave, and in her heart she always wanted to be a missionary. And so she finally gets accepted by the Missionary Society of America to be sent out as the first black lady, African-American lady, as a missionary to Hawaii. And they had to sign papers. They would not treat her like a slave, that she'd be an equal, because it was still new.
Yes.
You know, how that.
Yeah.
And so everybody did, and she goes to Hawaii, and she helps the Great Revival in Hawaii. So you have the missionaries show up, and in the middle of this, you've got Betsy Stockton, the first African-American single female missionary that we ever sent out officially to Hawaii to help the Great Revival in Hawaii. It's a great story.
That's amazing. Now you have a lot of people on the
Yeah.
cover. What countries did they go to? Because I'm sure that's on my mind. What countries?
Okay.
What countries?
Well,
did they visit?
we go to India. Livingston goes to Africa. Goforth and Taylor goes to China, which a great story. Hudson Taylor and Goforth, great story. Brainerd is the young man that goes to the Native Americans.
Okay.
That Jonathan Edwards writes his life story. Amy Carmichael goes to India and falls into a call to rescue the prostitute temple children from being used for
Wow.
the priest, and
That's amazing.
starts being the mother of these people, and that her story is amazing. And then we've got Mr. Judson here that goes to Burma to write the Burmese language, and he married William Carey's, one of his daughters. And so then we got the Hawaiian people in there, so we've got all those nations
Wow.
in there. David Livingston, wonderful story. I know we know him as the great explorer, but his whole motive of doing what he did was so that he could open the door that the gospel could go to the inner parts of Africa. So sometimes people get a little mad because commerce came, but his whole motive was that he would go to Africa and map it out so that the missionaries could come in and follow his maps and go to the villages and teach Jesus.
Wow.
And that's what happened. Reinhard Bonnke writes the foreword to the book.
Really?
And so I wrote.
Reinhard's awesome.
Yeah, great man, great man. So when he said yes, I thought, oh, I've had a miracle. And so he writes the foreword, and he tells the story in his foreword that he preaches in a town, Blantyre, where David Livingston went and preached and had no converts. He comes about 100 years later, a little over 100 years later, and has thousands of people saved. And he quotes Livingston saying, I am sowing the seed of the gospel that one day there'll be great harvest in Africa. And Bonnke goes, we owe Mr. Livingston. He goes, I owe, you know how he talks,
Yeah.
I owe Mr.
I owe
Livingston.
Mr. Livingston.
A great thank you. He sowed a seed in Blantyre. I reaped these thousands of souls. And it was just beautiful how he put it together. And we stand today on these and others.
Yes.
There's more than this, but
Oh,
this is the
absolutely,
best.
absolutely.
You know, you can only write so much, and you
Yeah.
have to stop. And then we stand on the shoulders of their suffering, of their willingness. And at one time, they didn't know, the church did not believe in missionaries. After the early church died out and, you know, the generation died off and they got into institutionalization, and then all of a sudden, people begin to say, why should we hear the gospel twice when someone never heard it once? And then we started started preaching about the Great Commission. Well, those were new ideas because they thought, God's already done it. If he wants to get them saved, he'll get them saved. And then they realize we have to go. So we are fruit. We are matured fruit of these guys who went first, who said, we need to go to the world, to the heathen. They called them the heathen in
Yes.
those days. We need to go to the heathen. And they went first and created the whole missionary spirit that we have today.
Yes.
And so when you read the book, you'll understand how it evolved. I start out with the Moravians, Count Zinzendorf,
Okay.
with the Great Revival, and they prayed for 100 years.
Wow.
And they are what I would call, in my understanding of history, their prayers of 100 years was the womb by which God birthed the great missionaries things that we've all seen in past and in our lifetime. And so we're so glad that they prayed their guts out so that we can have the great harvest of the world today. And then I talk about Hudson Taylor, and I know we don't have a lot of time, but Hudson Taylor went to China as a British missionary. And he was a nice guy, but he wanted to go to the inner parts of China. And so he does something radical. He goes where missionary has not gone, but he does something crazy because the British missionaries, now I love them, but they would bring the Bible and their culture. So Hudson Taylor goes to China and says, I'm going to dress like a Chinese man. I'm going to learn to eat with chopsticks in a bowl. And they thought he was crazy. And so because he learned the language, dressed like the average middle class Chinaman at that time period, and grew a ponytail, you'll see pictures of it in the book, when he left, 40% of Christianity had grown, 40% growth in inland China because he changed, and his change we now do today. We celebrate the cultural difference, but we bring the message. You don't have to accept Jesus and the American or British culture. Accept Jesus. He'll go in your culture with your music,
Amen.
with your dress, with your food, and he will save you in your culture. And that's one thing that Hudson Taylor did for us. He helped break that part that needed to be kind of edged out.
Yeah.
And so we're so glad that he grew a ponytail, used chopsticks, and dressed like a Chinaman.
Absolutely. So, I mean, so when I go to India, what I'm reaping is what Carmichael started.
Carmichael did, and William Carey and some of them, yeah.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. That's amazing, the stories. Now, a lot of you don't know that Roberts is also a great historian of this, and this is where a lot of the material is coming from. Do you feel every time you're putting one of these beautiful God Generals books together, do you feel like you're giving us, the Christian family, our heritage?
I'm giving your heritage, and hopefully I'm inspiring you to be a missionary today.
Amen.
Or to send some of your money to some missionaries that are around the world that you can pray for and support if you can't go.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
a lot of our young people, these people were married with their babies in their arm and they went. So don't use your babies as an excuse. Please pray about spending a month or maybe a year or maybe 10 years of your life on a foreign field.
Yes.
To help spread the gospel, and let it be in a small village. You don't have to be in the big town.
Oh, absolutely.
Go someplace where the gospel's little and make it big.
Everybody
That's
knows.
what I want them to have when they read the
Everybody
book.
knows on my show, when I go, I go to the roughest parts. I go to Arista, I go to the jungles, the mountains.
That's beautiful.
And I keep them 300 to 1,000 people. That's as much as we'll take in.
Yeah.
And people are blessed.
Yeah.
Because that's where they're hungry. That's
Yeah.
where it's needed.
Yeah.
Tell them how they can get the book.
You can get the book at any bookstore, Barnes & Noble, family bookstores, or if they're on our website, robertsliardon.com, or Amazon, you can get it and download it. We have it all available. So
It'll be in September.
in September, it will be out. So it's in its processes right now.
Okay.
This is our first little copy of it. So hopefully you'll get the book.
And I'm sure on the site you can pre-order the book.
You can pre-order the book, and if you call my office and ask me, I'll autograph it for you too.
That's an awesome deal. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. We'll always see you again.
Absolutely. And we'll be back with another great guest.